Should Europe start mining its own energy transition metals? The last 10 years, no new mines have opened in Europe. It seems to be so difficult for Europe to make up its mind. Do we want primary mining or not? Today, Maria Nyberg, DG Grow, will come and give a lecture at this conference here. I'm desperate to find out if Europe is going to change its view on supporting primary mining of metals or not. Okay, Maria, thanks for coming here to speak to us. I would really like to hear from you, what is the European Commission's position with respect to primary mining of energy transition metals in Europe?
Yes, happy to be here. Well, first of all, as you said, it is really, just to underline that it is really the green and digital transition that is the main driver behind the great exponential increase of base metals and CRMs that a number of studies and analyses have showed. It is really that which is the main driver. And that is what we want to see happen. We want to get away from fossil fuels. And from the European Commission side, we have a three-pronged approach as concerns making sure that our economy and the transition that our industries are going through, that they have access to sustainably produced raw materials for their work. So our three-pronged approach, it stands on three parts, and it is first about making sure that we recycle and increase circularity as much as we can, that we get better on that. And you know that for a number of base metals, the recycling input rate from this part is already doing good. It performs quite well, but for a number of CRMs needed for the transition, the recycling input rate is next to zero. So that is not something that we can. The situation cannot keep up, stay the same. But even though we increase dramatically, considerably, the recycling input rates of the base metals and of the CRMs, even though this will happen, what many analyses show is that it will not be enough to meet the needs. We will still be needing materials that are extracted from the ground as primary raw materials. So for that part, we have two ways of getting them. We can either source them, produce them from the reserves that exist within our territory, within the EU, and that is already happening. We have a number of important mining areas and countries in the EU, so this is already an existing industry. More so on the base metals, industrial minerals, and aggregates than on the critical raw materials, but we also have that, just to say it. The other way that we can get these materials is that we buy them from outside of the EU, naturally. Now, the situation today is that if you read the criticality assessment that we published in 2020, together with a list of critical raw materials, you will see that the number of countries in the world at a global scale that the EU sources from, it is very concentrated. So you have a few number of countries that we source a big chunk of our CRMs from. And it's not only about production, it is only the further refining and processing that is important. Take, for example, rare earths, where it is really that is where the big crunch is, and it is very dominated by one actor. So as concerns sourcing from the outside, what we are that is the third part in our kind of the basis for our raw materials policy, is to diversify the risk, to source more from like-minded countries, resource-rich countries, to diversify our exposure, basically. And this is already happening as well. We had earlier on last year, we set up a raw materials partnership with Canada, and this is already showing really good results. So we have a lot of exchanges with them as concerns research and innovation, and we see investments coming. So that is a really good case. We also set up a raw materials partnership with Ukraine. Now, for obvious reasons, that is at a standstill, but it holds a lot of potential for when one day Ukraine will be once again in a non-war situation, and this is an important part. We are not just leaning back and being happy with this. We are also exploiting other areas. Australia is an important mining country. There are a number of countries on the African continent where we are looking at possibilities of having a setup that brings added value both to them and to us. So it's not about grabbing their stuff and leaving them with kind of depriving them of rising upwards in the value chain, but we really want to have a good value creation on their side and also strengthening our economy and our industries at the same time. So this is a little bit the broad line of the raw materials policy.
But I have the impression that European citizens, they'll be very happy with the story about improved recycling and sourcing materials from other parts in the world, with Canada, Australia and so on. But when we come to opening new mines in Europe for lithium, for rare earths, we see that it's extremely difficult to do so. The social license to operate is a very difficult target to achieve. Norra Kärr in Sweden is a very good example. We know that that one particular rare earth mine would probably have enough rare earths to serve the whole European economy, but we see that it can't get past the line. We see the same thing for Mino de Barroso in the north of Portugal as a big lithium mine. Again, social license operate very difficult. So what is your viewpoints from the Commission there on how to get further in terms of public acceptance for mining of energy transition metals in Europe?
So the two specific cases you mentioned, indeed there has been a lot of discussion and dialogue about them, and a lot of questions raised from the local community, not least in Portugal, on the development, which it is more mature than the case you mentioned in the south of Sweden. I would like to say that well, first of all, as I said before, we already have a mining industry in the EU, and look at how is that playing out. How do people in mining in areas where mining is taking place, how do they see the situation? Research shows that it is often the ones that are the most alienated in distance geographically from a mine that are the most opposed. So whereas people who live in an area where mining is an important part of the society, I believe that they take a different view, and I do not think that we should render the mining of CRMs that more different than mining for base metals, which is already happening today. What we can say is that the mining that takes place in the EU, it abides by extensive legislation on the environmental side, as relates governance aspects, as relates health and safety, health and occupational safety aspects. We have an extensive legislative package in place already that is both sectoral to some extent to the mining industry, and then we have the more horizontal legislation. And this leads me to draw the conclusion that mining that takes place in the EU with our legislation in place and with completed, of course, with national legislation and the international conventions that we have signed up to, we can truly say that it abides by the legislation. So therefore, we can consider that it is. How shall I put it?
I would call it responsible mining. Responsible mining, multi-mineral and multi-metal, in such a way that you try to move towards a zero waste approach, where you have social consent, buy-in of the local populations, co-benefits, community benefits. And if you put that all together, then of course, we can produce the lithium and the nickel, cobalt, rare earths in Europe, but we also realize then that we will be producing millions and millions of tons of residual minerals. So we need to absorb them into the construction industry then. So my question there is, what is the European Commission going to do in order to make it possible for all those minerals to be absorbed in new cement, new concrete, new ceramics? Because without that, we cannot go to the zero waste approach.
Yes, I'd like to I will answer your question about the residual minerals first. So the most important legislative measure that we have in place for that, it is the Extractive Waste Directive, which was initiated which came about in 2006, according to this legislation, it is about making sure that the waste from extraction, now this relates not only to non-energy raw materials, which is the core of our talk here today, it is broader, it is also the energy raw materials, but it is about making sure that you take care of the waste, that you don't have the accidents and serious, completely violating environmental legislation and making damage. So that legislation is in place, and this legislation also includes provisions for that you can recover extractive waste for the production of raw materials. So that is already there. Quite a number of, in the European Green Deal, we have included quite a wide range of, rather in the Green Deal, it was clear that we need to make sure that various legislations are fit for purpose towards the Green Deal target. For this reason, for example, the batteries legislation has been revised, the end-of-life vehicles directive that is ongoing. Now the extractive waste directive was not pointed at separately in the Green Deal as a legislation that needs to be revised, but a revision has not taken place for a quite long time. So I leave it open if it will happen or not. I can only say that the kind of legislative measures that you are asking for should happen from this part. Can I just come back a little bit once again to regarding production of extraction and processing in EU, production of raw materials in the EU. From our political leaders, our Commissioner
Šefčovič, for example.
Šefčovič, absolutely, and also Thierry Breton, our Commissioner for Industry. They have spoken to the public in the recent months, saying that raising just what we have talked about here now, seeing that even if we close the loop in terms of circularity, it will not be enough to meet the needs, because the going climate neutral, it will require so much rare earths for the wind turbines, so much graphite for the electric vehicles, that we simply cannot do without them. And in that context, they have raised the question to the public: is it really morally responsible to say that we don't want the mines here in our beautiful landscape, and where we want to, we don't want it here, but it is okay to source it from the outside.
So Šefčovič agrees with me. Basically, Europeans want Teslas, but they don't want the cars. So they don't want the mines to produce the metals for these cars. So it's a very hypocritical position. I've pointed this out many times, but I have the impression that Šefčovič is on the same wavelength now.
Well, this is a message from our political leaders to really reflect on, to take a moral obligation to make sure that the stuff that we need for producing, for going climate neutral, that we cannot just skip the burden of producing it to the outside.
We are exporting the responsibility, the environmental burden, the social impact, and then it's very easy to say, let's just import refined rare earths or refined lithium from China.
But I think hypocritical, that is a strong word to use. I would say that it is about simply not knowing what mining is about. Perhaps never having seen a modern mine of today, and I think it is. I think that is a matter that plays in, and it is also so that a mine is there for a certain time, and in the we have. In order to start a mine, you need to have a permit to open your operations, and to obtain that permit, you need also to define clearly what you will do when you have produced the raw materials that you tend to produce. What will you do at the end of when you are closing the mine? So a mine has a lifetime, and in modern mining in the EU, you prepare for also the afterlife of that, where we see cases there. For example, you have cases where you have increased biodiversity in earlier mining sites. I'm painting perhaps too much a rosy picture. I don't want to do that. For sure, mining has an impact on the. It is a land use with an impact, that is clear. But what I'm saying is that the legislation that we have in place minimizes this impact, and it is a robust basis. That is my opinion. And I only wanted to say in this context that we have a lot of people, when you buy your meat, when you are going to prepare...
I'm a vegetarian myself, but...
Very good. When I buy my meat, when I'm going to prepare dinner tonight, I like to buy it from... I want to know that what I buy is produced in a okay way, in an ethical way, and I am prepared to I can eat meat once a week instead of 4 times a week, and then perhaps buy a little bit better quality. Yes, and this behavior, I don't think I'm the only one with this. I think this also stretches into other areas of our way of life and the way we consume, and we want to know that the metals that go into the wind turbine that is placed in my region, that it is produced in a good way.
So we want ethical mining, basically. Not responsible mining, we need ethical mining.
Yes, well, for me,
right
responsible
term,
and ethical are quite close. And for this, so you have a range. So this is kind of consumption behavior I wanted to point at. And industry is not late to pick up on this. So you will see a big number of industry-led initiatives to show that their specific metal or their specific installation is ethical, responsible, yes? So you have a big number of those. And there often, for example, you have something called towards sustainable mining, a kind of standard, which is completed with a number of indicators that show
like
that
an
you
ISO
really
certification, kind
something
of.
that like that related to that really show that you abide by it. Okay, yeah. So we thought about a lot we who are working with the EU raw materials policy in the European Commission. So what does the landscape look like? What is the is there any need for action from our side here? And we worked out together with member states, together with industry, with researchers, with civil society organizations, with social partners. We came to the conclusion that it would be good to have a kind of EU principles for sustainable raw materials, that it would not need to be a mandatory initiative, and we wouldn't put up a range of indicators for industry to show that they're abiding. But we want to say that because the legislation I just mentioned earlier on, because we have this legislation in place, and then we kind of target a certain number of important principles on the environmental side, on the occupational health and safety side, on the governance side, we can rally around these principles, which are based on legislation, and this becomes a kind of evidence on that mining in the EU is sustainable. Okay, so this initiative we published in September last year. You can find it when you Google.
So if Europe agrees with going for ethical primary mining here in our continent, then I think we should also have a look at the permitting procedures for obtaining the permits for a new mine. We hear from companies that they say if they want to open a new mine, it takes them 10 years to go through the whole permitting procedure. By that time, the metal that they want to mine might not be critical anymore by the time the mine opens. So if we really want to go for it, I think we have to move faster. We need some kind of fast-track procedure based on clear principles, of course, but how can we fast-track such permitting procedure, because 10 years is clearly too much?
We heard one of the speakers earlier today from Canada. He talked about that their permit, the whole procedure took 6 weeks.
That's Canada, it's not the European Union.
That's nice, that's nice. I think 10 years for me, that is a very, I would not agree on that the average time length is 10 years. But we do.
It was for Sweden. It was mentioned for Sweden.
Yes, but that's a specific case. I think that I can talk about it. I think it has more relevance to talk about the general situation. So it is clear that let me say the attractiveness of European mining industry has decreased in terms of the Fraser Institute scoring, for example. So the investment climate, you can say, for European industry, it has decreased. And one important factor is the lengthy permitting procedures. I think the main thing regarding the permitting processes is that there's a need that they are predictable, so that you know that if I provide this documentation, then this will happen, and this will, so that you can make your risk assessment, and you can have a reasonable mastering of the process. What is worrying is the lack of predictability. That is what investments fear the most. So that is something where I really think that we can do better without having to cut down or to neglect the legislation in place. I think there are ways to improve it.
And probably Finland is the best example to look at. They have been able to fast-track these procedures. If you look at the lithium situation in Finland, it's going very fast. They have this Finnish Battery Alliance, which has a very clear view on what they want. So the government there is really strong on supporting these raw material policy initiatives. And I think that's essential, that the member states, governments need to work together with the European Union to make this happen. If one of the two parties is not willing to do so, it's going to be very difficult.
Yes. That is a very good case you bring up, but we are very happy to sit down and see at what can we do together, but at the same time we are mindful about how the situation is regarding the EU competences, and this is clearly a matter of national competences. But we are, of course, and we will initiate further dialogue with member states on this, because this is something that strikes not only on the mining activities, but on other land uses as well. We see it for renewable energy.
Wind turbines is the same problem.
So that is for sure an area that we need to tackle, and we should have Canada as something to strive for. 6 weeks.
Good. When will the first rare earth mine be opened in Europe?
We just 2 weeks ago, the production of rare earths, which will meet a considerable amount of EU needs by 2030, was launched. But this is not a mine. That's
Boliden. That's the REMAP project, I guess.
This is not a mine. Yeah. This is about making use of rare earths, plus also other stuff like phosphorus from iron ore mining tailings. But it's an important step. But we also, we need more rare earths, and not only the extraction, but we need the processing and the refining.
Yeah, so for reprocessing of old mining waste, of course, we have the NEMO project, which is exactly trying to achieve that target. I think we can stop here. Thanks for coming here.